We're going to walk through problem 517. So the first thing that I've done is I've laid out the information right here. And job 1 says classify our costs, so I actually put those in for us. So if we look up here for the direct labor and for the equipment, we're going to say that that's unit output. And the reason that is they're associated, these costs are incurred on each unit of material that we're testing for every hour of testing. So these are unit level. The more units we make, the more costs we incur. Letter C, which was our setup costs, that's at a batch level because they're incurred each time a batch of material is set up for either the heat testing or the stress testing. Regardless of the number of hours we spend, each time we set up one of these runs, we have to pay this cost. So this is at a batch level. And lastly, the design testing. That's a service sustaining cost because they're incurred to design the heat testing and the stress testing regardless of the number of batches that tested or the number of hours of test time. So this would be a service sustaining level. So now that we've explained that, let's go on and look at part 2, which says classify the cost per hour and explain why they're different than the 17. Remember, the author calculated the 17 for us. So under simple costing methods, the author took the 190,000 and divided it by the 70,000 hours to get this total of $17 per hour. We also learned in the problem that for heat testing, the test hours expected would be 40,000. And for stress testing, they'd be 30, so that's a total of 70,000 hours that we have. And the author told us direct labor for heat testing would be 100, and stress testing would be 46. So if we add those together, that's where we're going to get the 146 that we're going to start with. So I've set this problem up and started this process down here. Let's go and add direct labor. So here's what we're going to do. The author tells us that this is 100. And the author tells us that the stress test is 46. Now we're just going to divide this 100 by the 40,000 hours. We'll divide this 46 by the 30,000 hours to get our per hour cost. So I'm going to just format these because I think 2 decimals are appropriate in these cases. So we'll see that that is now for direct labor. Let's go look at the equipment, which we need to do a little bit of an extra step on this. So our equipment, if we look at things, we know that the equipment has $350,000. And of that amount, we know that we can take the 40,000 plus the 30,000, which gives us 70, and we need to divide that by this. So we're going to end up taking, again, if we take the 350 and we divide by the 70, we get $5 an hour. We're going to have to use that. So $5 an hour is what we're looking at for that. So let's go then take this equipment. Now the equipment tells us that we were going to have 40,000 hours on the heat test, so we're going to go take 40,000 times the $5 that we calculated. That gives us $200,000 in cost. And now we'll go take 30,000 times the $5 that we calculated. And the cost associated, that should be $150. Obviously we used $5 up here, so I'll just fill this in to be consistent. So that takes care of our equipment setup cost. So on our setup costs, we need to figure out the setup costs the same way that we just did above. So we're going to start with the 430 and In this case, we need to look at the setup hours. So we're going to divide this. So let me stick a parenthesis up here. And we're going to divide it by the sum of the 13 and the 36. And we should get an hourly rate for that. So it's $25 per setup hour. Let's put this out to 2 decimal points. Once we've done that, then we're going to go actually look at this based on the number of hours. So we're going to take the 25 that we calculated and we're going to multiply it by the 13.6. That gives us 340. We'll take the 25 that we calculated and we'll multiply it by 3,600 setup hours, which will give us 90. So if we look at 90, we then can take the 340 divided by the 40, which would give us $8.50 an hour. We take the 90 that we calculated and we divide it by the 30,000 hours, and that then gives us $3 per hour. We'll do the same thing for the design. So in this case, we start for our design work here. And in our design work, we know we have a total of 264. And again, we're going to have to say that this 264 should be divided by the total of the 3,000 plus the 1,4. That gives us $60 per hour. We'll then go use that and we'll say that we have $60 times 3,000. And we have 60 times 1,400. And then we'll go use this based on what we know. So if we take 180 divided by the 40, we'll get $4.50 an hour. We take the 84 that we calculated and we divide it by the 30,000 and we get $2.80. So let's see what these would total if we did it in this fashion in a much more detailed way. So let's add these totals up. Spread that across. And we'll put in some formatting. So from a calculation standpoint, to calculate the cost per hour, we would actually, if we were looking at it department specific, or in this case cost area specific, we would see that for the heat testing we'd end up at $820,000, and for the stress testing we'd end up at $370,000. So rather than a blended rate of 17, we see that the heat testing should actually be at $20.50, and the stress testing should really only be at $12.33. So the reason that heat testing uses direct labor, setup, design resources per hour more intensely than the stress testing, heat testing are more complex, they take longer, they're more difficult to design. So the simple cost system assumes that the testing costs per hour are the same for heat testing and simple testing. So therefore, when we break it down in a little bit better approach, we learned that that is truly not the case, that the heat testing is more expensive and therefore those customers should be charged at a higher rate than we would have if we didn't do and we just did the simple costing of 17. So if we look at number 3 and it says explain the accuracy, the ABC system better captures the resources needed for heat testing and stress testing because it identifies all the various activities undertaken when performing the tests and recognizing the level at which these costs vary. So what I'm saying is the ABC system generates a much more accurate product cost. Now, Vineyard's management can use the information from ABC to make better pricing and product mix decisions. For example, it might decide to increase the prices charged for the more costly heat testing and reduce the pricing on the stress test. Vineyard should watch to see if its competitors are underbidding them in the stress test area, causing them to lose business. They also could use the ABC information to reduce costs by eliminating processes and activities that don't add value. Maybe they could identify or evaluate new methods to do testing that reduce the activities needed to do the tests. Reducing the cost of various activities would actually help them plan and manage better. So as we saw in class when we were together, this is a definite more accurate reflection and it can help us make better decisions.